A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. That very day, the first day of the week, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he replied to them, "What sort of things?" They said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, how our chief priests and rulers handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since this took place. Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women had described, but him they did not see." And he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke! Was it not necessary that Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on farther, but they urged him, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them, and it happened that while he was with them at table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that, their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us when he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us?" So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11, and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." Then the 2 recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The Gospel of the Lord. The Gospel that I just read to you is from today's Mass. And it really is a beautiful passage for us to reflect on. It's after Jesus' resurrection, because we continue to celebrate the Easter season, and in a special way the Octave of Easter, these 8 days of great celebration of the resurrection. And we saw in the Gospel that 2 of Jesus' disciples are on a journey. They're walking to Emmaus. And as they're walking, they run into a mysterious traveler, who we as the listeners know is Jesus. But these 2 disciples don't know that he's Jesus. Again, after the resurrection, Jesus' body doesn't follow the normal rules of time and space like we were reminded of yesterday. And so he appears different to these disciples. And so in a sense, he disguises himself in the flesh to them so that they can't recognize him. And he asked them, what were you talking about? And they recount what had happened to Jesus. And so they go through this, and then Jesus really interprets for them the Old Testament in light of him. He shows how the Old Testament, how the prophets all ultimately point to Jesus' death and how they point to the life and death, resurrection of Jesus. And it says that they were so just enamored by him that they invite him to stay with them after the it's kind of the close of the day. They invite him to stay with them in the town where they were traveling to. And so when Jesus stayed with them, he breaks bread And suddenly they recognize him. Their eyes are open. They see that this is Jesus. This mysterious traveler was actually Jesus. We see in this passage a beautiful reminder of the Mass. At Mass there are two main parts. We may not always realize this, but there are two main parts to the Mass. The first part is the liturgy of the Word. The second part is the liturgy of the Eucharist. The liturgy of the Word is where we hear the Scriptures, the Old Testament, or in certain special seasons we'll hear from the Acts of the Apostles. We hear from a psalm that's very often sung. We have the Gospel. We have the homily, which sort of explains the reading, sort of opens up the Scriptures, we could say. We have the Creed, where we profess our belief in what we have just heard. We have the intercessions, where we pray for the world, right? So that this is all the liturgy of the Word, and then we go on to the liturgy of the Eucharist, where the focus becomes the altar, preparing the altar, and ultimately the Eucharist, the sacrifice of the Mass, right? And so we have these two main parts. This is what we see in the Gospel today, that Jesus is doing a sort of liturgy of the Word with them as they're walking to Emmaus, and then that we see that Jesus does a sort of liturgy of the Eucharist for them in the town, that this is a foreshadowing of the Mass, and that Jesus' presence with the church, as I mentioned yesterday, is different now. He's not with us in the same way as he was with the disciples originally, but he's with us in actually an even more powerful way through the Mass. We saw that he was revealed to them in the breaking of the bread, and in that sort of action that we remember at the Mass, Jesus is powerfully present to us in the Mass. I've had a number of people contact me to let me know that this challenging period of time away from Mass has reminded them how important the Mass is. And they've done more praying, and it's been really significant for their spiritual lives. And so in that sense, they're really preparing for when the Mass will return. My concern becomes those who maybe are becoming a little comfortable without Mass, right? It's a lot easier to be able to watch Mass from your living room in your pajamas, right? Or it's a lot simpler to not have to wake up early to go to Mass on Sunday morning and just to sort of take it easy, right? And so I'm concerned. I'm nervous. I think that there are some folks who will kind of grow into a pattern and forget the importance of the Mass, so that even when Mass comes back, it might be a challenge to rebuild that habit and to re-emphasize the importance of Mass in their life. So wherever you're at right now, I just encourage you to deepen your love for the Mass, to desire the Eucharist more and more, to continue your prayer life, and look forward to when the Mass will return publicly. Because we are reminded in today's Gospel that Jesus is present. He makes himself present to us in a powerful, powerful way through the celebration of the Holy Mass. May God bless you all.